The footage played on every screen inside the garrison briefing hall. A Fenari raiding party tearing through a human-supplied depot like it was made of paper. 6 tall insectoid hunters moving with perfect coordination, their segmented limbs slicing through metal containers while 3 human guards lay motionless on the ground. The attack had lasted 90 seconds. The retreat had taken even less. Commissioner Brielle Asa paused the footage and turned to face the room full of rangers. "This is what we're dealing with," she said. "Apex predators. Born hunters. Every single species on the galactic frontier respects the food chain. And right now, humanity is not at the top." She tapped the console, and a new display appeared. Bold letters across the screen read Predator Protocol. "Starting today, every ranger stationed on Tessera will undergo behavioral reconditioning. You will learn aggression cycling, predatory instinct triggers, dominance response patterns, and kill priority targeting. You will stop thinking like settlers. You will start thinking like the thing that eats settlers." Darren Hollis sat in the 3rd row and watched the faces around him. Some rangers leaned forward with hungry eyes. Others nodded slowly, already buying in. The message was simple and powerful. The galaxy was dangerous, so humanity had to become more dangerous. Darren had been on Tessera for 3 years. He had walked its deep forests more times than anyone in the garrison. He knew where the root systems grew thickest, where the bioluminescent fungi pulsed brightest after rainfall, where the wind shifted direction based on valley temperature. He had mapped animal migration routes that the garrison satellites could not even detect because the forest canopy was too dense for orbital scanning. Tessera swallowed technology. Drones lost signal within minutes under the canopy. Ground sensors corroded in the fungal moisture. Satellite imaging showed nothing but an endless green blur. The only way to know this world was to walk it, breathe it, and listen to it. Asa continued her presentation. Compadrid, hormone modification, neural aggression implants. She talked about turning humans into something the Fenari would fear. Darren stood up and walked toward the door. "Ranger Hollis," Asa called out without turning around. "The briefing is not finished." "The briefing is wrong," Darren said. The room went silent. Asa turned slowly. "Explain." "The Fenari are better predators than us," Darren said. "They are faster, they see in wider spectrums, their reflexes are 3 times ours, and they have been hunting as a species for 60,000 years. Training humans to out-predator them is like training fish to outrun birds. It does not work." "Then what do you suggest, Ranger?" "Something else." He left the room. Asa filed a disciplinary warning on his record before he reached the corridor. That evening, Darren sat on the garrison wall and watched the treeline. Tessera's forest stretched in every direction to the horizon, a living carpet of dark green and faint blue bioluminescent glow that pulsed gently as the temperature dropped. The forest was breathing. It always breathed. He had tried to explain this to the garrison scientists once. The fungal networks beneath the forest floor connected every tree, every root system, every patch of moss. When something moved through the forest, the fungi reacted. Pressure on the ground triggered faint bioluminescent flares that spread outward like ripples in water. The entire forest floor was a living alarm system. The Fenari knew how to use it. They moved lightly enough to minimize the flares. Human patrols did not. Every time a garrison squad entered the forest, they lit up the fungal network like a signal fire. The Fenari could track human movement from kilometers away simply by watching the ground glow. The Predator Protocol would make this worse. Aggressive movement meant heavier footfalls. Combat formations meant more bodies triggering more flares. Asa was about to turn every ranger on Tessera into a walking beacon that a siren broke the silence. Eastern Ridge. Another Fenari raid. Darren watched the garrison mobilize below him. Soldiers running, vehicles starting, weapons charging. They would reach the Eastern Ridge in 20 minutes. The Fenari would be gone in 5. They always were. He looked at the forest instead. The bioluminescent glow near the southern valleys was shifting in a slow wave pattern, moving north to south. That meant a group of large bodies had passed through the southern root canyons approximately 40 minutes ago, heading toward the deep forest. The Fenari raiding party was already retreating along the canyon network, and the fungal ripple was their ghost trail. He could see it plainly from here. Nobody at the garrison had ever thought to look. Captain Nolafried found him still sitting on the wall an hour later. "You missed the response deployment," she said. "They went south through the root canyons," Darren said. 40 minutes before the siren. "You will not find them now." Nola stared at him. "How do you know that?" "The ground told me." She waited for more explanation. He did not give one. "Asa wants you on formal warning," Nola said. Walking out of the briefing was not smart. Sending conditioned predators into a forest that broadcasts their every step is not smart either. Nola leaned on the wall beside him. Below, soldiers were returning from the failed response. Empty-handed, frustrated. 3 more humans had died at the supply depot, and the Fenari had vanished like they always did. "If not predators," Nola said quietly, "then what?" Darren looked at the forest. The bioluminescent glow had settled back to its resting rhythm. Calm, steady, alive, something they have never seen before, he said. He did not explain further. But that night, he began packing. 3 days after the briefing, Darren Hollis stopped existing on paper. He did not file a departure notice. He did not log a patrol route. He removed his location beacon, left his communicator on his bunk, and walked into the Tessara forest with a short blade, 40 meters of rope, a water filter, and nothing else. The garrison noticed his absence on the second morning. Asa classified him as a deserter within the hour and forwarded the file to Captain Nola Freed for confirmation. Nola sat at her desk and stared at the file. Desertion carried a serious penalty. If Darren was found, he would face tribunal and likely imprisonment. She had the authority to delay the classification, and she used it. Something about his words on the garrison wall had stuck with her. "The ground told me. No scanner, no satellite, no drone." A man reading the forest floor from a kilometer away and knowing exactly where the enemy had gone. She opened his old patrol reports instead. Most rangers filed brief entries. Location visited, duration, threats observed. Darren's reports were different. They read like ecological studies. He had documented fungal growth rates by season, mapped underground root tunnel networks across 16 square kilometers, recorded how animal species responded to Fenari presence versus human presence, and charted bioluminescent pulse patterns correlated to ground pressure. He had been studying this world the way a student studies a language. Not to conquer it, to speak it. Nola closed the desertion file without signing it. Deep in the forest, Darren was learning to disappear. The first challenge was the fungal network. Every step on the forest floor triggered bioluminescent reactions. The heavier the step, the brighter the flare, and the farther the ripple spread. A human walking normally through the forest created a visible trail that lasted minutes. A running human created a trail visible for nearly an hour. Darren spent the first 3 days practicing movement. He studied which surfaces reacted least. Exposed root surfaces were nearly dead to the fungal network. Stone outcroppings were neutral. Thick moss patches dampened the flare by 60%. Wet soil after rain was the worst. Maximum glow, maximum spread. He mapped a movement pattern. Root to root, stone to stone, moss when necessary. He walked circuits through the same area until his passage triggered almost nothing. It was slow, painfully slow. But by the 5th day, he could cross 200 meters of forest floor and leave a bioluminescent trail, so faint it was indistinguishable from natural animal movement. Next was shelter. He found root hollows, gaps beneath massive tree root systems where the ground had eroded into natural chambers. The fungi did not grow inside these hollows because the root chemistry suppressed them. No glow, no signal. Invisible. He ate what the forest offered. Tessara had 17 species of edible fungus that grew on deadwood. The root bark of the oldest trees could be shaved and boiled into a thick, nutritious paste. Small ground-dwelling animals could be trapped using simple rope snares placed along established trails. He never lit a fire. The Fenari could smell combustion residue from extraordinary distances. On the 8th day, he heard them, A Fenari scouting party moved through the valley below his position. 5 hunters led by a lean, careful scout who moved differently from the others. Where the rest of the group walked with the confident stride of apex predators, this one paused frequently, tested the air, studied the ground, and touched the tree bark with his long segmented fingers. Darren would later learn this was Laurith, the best tracker among the Fenari forces on Tessera. The scouting party was checking navigation markers. The Fenari had carved subtle symbols into trees along their established routes through the forest. Direction indicators, distance markers, danger warnings. They used these carved trails like roads. Darren watched them pass and memorized every marker he could see. That night, he visited the markers. He did not destroy them. Destruction would be obvious. Instead, he made small changes. He deepened a directional groove to shift its apparent angle by 15 degrees. He added moisture to a distance marker so the carving would swell and distort within days. He transplanted a species of bark-eating insect colony onto a warning marker so it would be naturally consumed within a week. Subtle. Patient. The forest doing what forests do, eroding, shifting, consuming. Nothing that would look deliberate. On the 12th day, the Fenari scouting party returned along the same route. Darren watched from a root hollow 40 meters away. Laurith stopped at the first marker and tilted his head. He touched the carving, felt its altered angle, and looked around. He moved to the second marker and found the swollen wood. The third marker was half eaten by insects. The rest of the group noticed nothing wrong. But Laurith stood still for a long moment, his antennae rotating slowly, scanning the air and the ground and the canopy above. He said something to the others in quick Fenari speech. Darren did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Uncertainty. The first crack in confidence. They adjusted their route and moved on. But Laurith looked back twice before the forest swallowed them. Back at the garrison, Nola received reports that Fenari raid patterns had shifted slightly. Nothing dramatic, just small deviations from their usual approach corridors. The analysts attributed it to normal tactical rotation. Nola looked at the forest through her office window and wondered where Darren Hollis was sleeping tonight. Somewhere in the deep green, a man who refused to become a predator was becoming something else entirely. The forest breathed around him, and for the first time in 3 years of human settlement, it did not seem to mind the company. Laurith had been a scout for 11 years. And in all that time, he had never failed to track a living thing. He had hunted prey across frozen methane plains, through sulfur jungles, across worlds where the atmosphere itself tried to kill him. The Fenari were born trackers. Their antennae could detect pheromone trails days old. Their compound eyes processed movement in spectrums that most species could not even perceive. Their legs felt vibrations through solid ground. On Tessera, something was making him doubt all of IT. IT had started with the markers. Small changes to navigation carvings that could be explained by weather or insects. Then supply caches began disappearing. Not raided, not scattered by animals. Simply gone. A sealed container of dried protein buried beneath a root cluster. Gone. A water filtration unit hidden inside a hollow trunk. Gone. No tracks around the sites. No claw marks. No digging signs. No scent of any creature. Laurith reported the losses to Elder Suvan and requested permission to investigate. Animals, Suvan said dismissively. The forest here is dense with scavengers. No scavenger opens a sealed container and takes only the contents, Laurith replied. Suvan waved him off. The War Elder had larger concerns. The raids on human settlements were producing good results, and the regional command was pleased. A few missing supply caches were not worth attention, but Laurith could not let it go that he began spending days in the forest alone, circling the areas where supplies had vanished. He searched for the things a hunter searches for: broken stems, displaced soil, disturbed fungal patterns, scent residue on bark. He found almost nothing. Almost on the 4th day, he found a vine wrapped around a branch in a pattern that no wind or growth cycle would produce. It was a simple tie, a loop secured with a twist that prevented slipping. Functional, deliberate. He had seen humans use similar knots at their garrison. Something human was in the deep forest that he expanded his search radius. Over the next week, he found 3 more signs. A patch of bioluminescent fungi deliberately smeared with dark mud, killing its glow and creating a blind spot in the forest floor network. A natural water channel, slightly redirected by stone placement, so subtle it looked geological. A root tunnel entrance widened by careful cutting that mimicked animal gnawing. Each sign told the same story. Something was living inside the forest and modifying it with extraordinary patience. Not building, not destroying, adjusting, the way a body adjusts to temperature. Slowly, naturally, until the adjustment becomes invisible. Laurith reported his findings to Suvan again. "One human," Suvan said, and this time there was amusement in his voice. "You believe one human is living in this forest and disrupting our operations. I believe something intelligent is reshaping the terrain in ways that disadvantage our movement," Laurith said carefully. "Then find it and kill it." Laurith tried. He spent 12 days tracking what he had begun calling the anomaly. He followed the pattern of disruptions, each cache disappearance, each marker alteration, each modified water channel, and tried to triangulate a central area of activity. But the anomaly had no center. The disruptions were spread across nearly 30 square kilometers with no concentration, no pattern, no home base. Whatever this was, it did not stay in one place. It moved constantly like weather. Meanwhile, at the garrison, Commissioner Asa launched the first Predator Protocol field operation. A squad of 8 newly conditioned rangers was deployed into the forest to ambush a known Fenari patrol route. The rangers had undergone 3 weeks of aggression training. They moved fast, carried heavy weapons, and operated on attack-first principles. They triggered the bioluminescent network with their first steps. The fungal floor lit up beneath them like a glowing carpet, broadcasting their position, direction, and speed to anything watching. They were loud. Their boots cracked branches. Their equipment rattled. Their thermal signatures cut through the forest canopy in bright streaks that Fenari eyes could read from a distance. The Fenari patrol spotted them 20 minutes before the ambush point. By the time the Rangers reached their planned position, 12 Fenari hunters had already circled behind them. The fight lasted less than 4 minutes. 5 Rangers were killed. 3 escaped by sheer luck when a root collapse created a barrier the Fenari could not immediately cross. Asa received the casualty report in silence. Nola Freed stood in the briefing room doorway and said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not sound like blame, and blame was not what the dead Rangers needed. That night, Nola pulled up the garrison's old ecological survey database, the one Darren had contributed to for 3 years. She read his entries about the bioluminescent network. He had written it plainly. The forest floor is a pressure-sensitive communication system. Any force attempting to move aggressively through this environment will be detected long before visual or auditory contact. Conventional military movement on Tessera is strategically impossible. The entry was dated 14 months before the Predator Protocol was even proposed. Nola began sending her own scouts into the forest edge. Not to fight, not to patrol, to look for Darren Hollis. They found nothing. No trail, no camp, no sign that any human had entered the deep forest at all. But they found something else. A Fenari forward camp, fully stocked and recently occupied, completely abandoned. The shelters were intact. Supplies were untouched. Weapons were left behind. Around the camp, in a perfect circle spanning 200 meters, every bioluminescent fungal patch had been killed. The ground was dark. The air was still. No animal sounds came from any direction. The natural decomposition of the dead fungi produced a thick, sweet chemical smell that triggered a deep nausea in the scouts, a smell that apparently triggered something far worse in Fenari sensory systems. The camp had not been attacked. It had been made unbearable. The environment itself had rejected the Fenari presence, and they had simply left. Nola read the scout report 3 times. Then she looked at the forest through her window and, for the first time, smiled. The word Laurith used was not translatable into any human language. The closest approximation was the breath, a presence felt in the rhythm of a place rather than seen or heard. He had tracked animals across 9 worlds. He had pursued fleeing prey through environments designed to confuse every known sense. He had never encountered something that existed in the spaces between detection. The breath was not hiding from him. Hiding implied avoidance. This was different. This was integration. Whatever was out there had become so much a part of Tessera's living systems that distinguishing it from the forest itself was like trying to separate a current from the river carrying it. He followed it anyway. Day one of his solo pursuit took him into the southern root canyons where the oldest trees on Tessera grew. Their root systems had carved tunnels through the bedrock over centuries, creating a subterranean network that ran for kilometers beneath the forest floor. The air inside was cool, damp, and absolutely still. Bioluminescent fungi grew thick on the tunnel walls, casting a pale blue glow that made the passages feel like the veins of something alive. Laurith moved carefully. His antennae detected faint traces, not scent exactly, but chemical shifts in the air composition. Slightly elevated carbon dioxide in one tunnel branch, a fractionally different humidity level in another. Someone was breathing in these tunnels. Recently, regularly, he followed the carbon trace for 6 hours and found nothing. The trail dissolved at a junction where 3 tunnels met. Natural air circulation had mixed the traces beyond tracking. Day 2 took him above ground. He found a series of root hollows, natural shelters beneath massive tree bases, where the soil compression patterns suggested repeated use. But the compression could also have been caused by large burrowing animals. No clear evidence, no definitive human sign. Then he found something that stopped him completely. A section of the bioluminescent network had been rewired. There was no other word for it. The fungal filaments that connected patches of glowing organisms had been physically redirected, gently, without killing them, so that a ground pressure event in one location would trigger a visible flare 300 meters away in a completely different direction. Someone had turned the forest's own alarm system into a decoy network. Step here, and the glow appears over there. Laurith sat down on a root and stared at the modification for a long time. This was not sabotage. This was conversation. Whoever did this understood the fungal network well enough to speak its language and redirect its messages. The forest had not been damaged or disrupted. It had been gently persuaded to lie. On day 3, Laurith climbed to a high ridge and used his compound eyes to survey the canopy below. The forest stretched in every direction, green and blue and breathing. He watched for anomalies, irregular canopy movement, unusual bird flight patterns, any sign of disturbance. That he saw nothing out of place. The forest looked exactly as it should, and that, he realized, was the point. That night, he made camp in a concealed position beneath a fallen trunk. He placed his weapons beside him within arm's reach, a pulse blade and a short-range scattergun. He set no alarm because electronic devices attracted fungal interference on Tessera. He relied on his own senses. Fenari scouts could wake at the sound of a leaf turning 30 meters away. He woke with dawn light filtering through the canopy. His weapons were not beside him. He sat up instantly, every sense firing. His pulse blade and scattergun were neatly placed on a flat rock 5 meters from his sleeping position. His pack was untouched. His water container was full. He was certain it had been half empty when he slept. His food rations were exactly as he had left them. Nothing was taken. Nothing was damaged. But someone had approached a sleeping Fenari scout, an apex predator with sensory capabilities that made human technology look primitive, moved his weapons, filled his water, and left without creating a single vibration, scent trace, or air disturbance strong enough to wake him. Laurith stood motionless for a very long time. Then he picked up his weapons, packed his supplies, and began the walk back to the Fenari base camp. Elder Suvan was reviewing raid logistics when Laurith entered. The war elder looked up with mild interest. Report. Laurith placed his weapons on the table. We should leave this world. Suvan's antennae flattened. In Fenari body language, this was equivalent to a human narrowing their eyes. Explain. There is a human in the deep forest. One human. He has learned to move without triggering the bioluminescent network. He has redirected the fungal communication system to generate false signals. He has made at least one of our forward camps uninhabitable through environmental manipulation. He dismantled 3 months of our supply caching without leaving a single trackable trace. And last night, he approached me while I slept and moved my weapons to demonstrate that he could have killed me at any time. Suvin was quiet for a moment. One human who is no longer behaving like a human. He is behaving like the forest. He has not attacked us, Elder. He has not killed anyone. He is simply making this world reject us, and he is doing it so naturally that we cannot fight it because there is nothing to fight. You cannot wage war against weather. You cannot hunt the ground beneath your feet. Suvin leaned back. We are Fenari. We do not retreat from one organism. This is not one organism, Laurith said. This is one organism who has become every organism. The forest is his weapon, his shield, and his voice. We are not losing to a human. We are losing to a planet. Suvin dismissed him with a sharp gesture and returned to his logistics. But that night, for the first time since arriving on Tessera, the war elder locked his quarters before sleeping. Then the ground started failing. 3 hunters from a northern team fell into a root sinkhole. The hole had not existed on their maps because it had not existed a month ago. The root system in that area had been subtly weakened, small cuts in supporting roots, water redirected to erode soil beneath load-bearing structures. Natural processes accelerated and aimed by someone who understood exactly how Tessera's root architecture carried weight. The hunters were not injured badly, but climbing out of a 12-meter root pit in dense fog with no visibility took nearly an hour. A southern team walked into a natural bowl where the air temperature dropped 15 degrees in 30 meters. Cold air pooling. But cold air pooled in low areas during night, not during daytime operations. Someone had opened root tunnel ventilation points that normally stayed sealed, channeling subterranean cold air to the surface in specific locations. The temperature shock confused Fenari thermal sensing, which depended on stable ambient conditions for accurate readings. By midday, the 40 hunter formation had splintered into 9 separate groups, none of which could reliably locate the others. No one was dead. No one was seriously injured. But no one was functioning as a coordinated force anymore. Laurith found himself alone, and he had separated from his group deliberately, following his instincts rather than his orders. He moved carefully through the fog until he reached a small clearing, a gap in the canopy where the ground was unusually flat and free of root structures. The bioluminescent network here was completely dark. Every fungal organism in the clearing had been suppressed. The ground was black. In the surrounding fog and silence, the clearing felt like a void, a place where the forest had simply stopped existing. Laura stood in the darkness and listened. He heard breathing, not animal breathing, not wind through root tunnels, human breathing, steady, slow, controlled, coming from everywhere and nowhere because the fog scattered sound into a directionless presence. Then a voice spoke. It used Fenari trade language. Broken but clear, each word carefully formed by a mouth not designed for the sounds. You are the best hunter among them. Laurith did not move. His weapons were ready, but there was nothing to aim at. You feel it. This world does not want you here. The voice came from the darkness, from the fog, from the dead ground. It could have been 5 meters away or 50. I did not need to kill you. I never needed to kill any of you. The forest remembers everything that moves through it. It will remember that you try to force it open, and it will keep pushing back long after I am gone. Laurith spoke into the void. What are you? Silence. Then, so quietly that Laurith was not sure he truly heard it. I am what your people should have been afraid of from the beginning. Not a predator. A place. The fog shifted. The breathing stopped. The clearing was empty, if it had ever held anything at all. Laurith walked out of the forest at dawn the next morning. He was the last hunter to return. The others had straggled back throughout the night, disoriented, exhausted, and shaken. None of them were injured. All of them refused to go back. Elder Suvin did not give the retreat order. His hunters gave it for him. 40 veterans stood in the base camp clearing and refused reassignment to the forest. These were not cowards. These were soldiers who had charged fortified positions on other worlds, who had fought in conditions that would have killed most species. They stood with their weapons at their sides and their antennae flat against their skulls, and every one of them said the same thing in different words. The forest is aware. It chose a side. We cannot fight a world, Suvan argued. He threatened. He invoked duty and honor and the reputation of their species. None of it worked. A predator knows when the hunt has turned against it, and these predators knew with absolute certainty that Tessera was no longer a place where the Fenari could operate. Laurith stood apart from the group and watched his war elder struggle against a truth that Laurith had spoken weeks ago. He felt no satisfaction. He felt the same thing every hunter in that camp felt, a deep, instinctive unease that came from encountering something outside the natural order. Predator and prey. Hunter and hunted. These categories made sense. A human who had dissolved into the environment like salt into water did not make sense. The withdrawal took 2 days. The Fenari packed their camps, retrieved what supplies they could still locate, and moved toward the extraction point on the eastern plateau. As they marched, Laurith noticed something. The forest was quiet around them. No disruptions. No fog. No redirected fungal signals. The bioluminescent network pulsed gently and normally beneath their feet. The animal sounds were natural and undisturbed. The temperature was consistent. The forest was letting them leave. AT the garrison. Commissioner Asa demanded a full operational briefing. Captain Nola Freed delivered it with careful neutrality. The Fenari are withdrawing from Tessera. All raiding operations have ceased. Their base camps in the forest have been abandoned. Scout intercepts indicate they are classifying Tessera as a denied environment and do not intend to return. What? Asa asked. Nola placed a data tablet on the briefing table. Over the past 7 weeks, one individual operating alone in the deep forest systematically dismantled the Fenari's ability to operate on this world. He destroyed their navigation system by modifying trail markers to create cumulative errors. He eliminated their supply infrastructure by locating and removing hidden caches. He made forward camps uninhabitable through environmental manipulation, killing bioluminescent fungi to create sensory dead zones and triggering decomposition chemicals that overwhelmed Fenari olfactory systems. He redirected the planet's natural fungal communication network to generate false movement signals. He used terrain modification to create obstacles and hazards along established Fenari routes. And during the final sweep operation involving 40 elite hunters, he used fog generation, thermal manipulation, and acoustic disruption to fragment their formation and psychologically break their confidence. Who? Asa said, though her expression suggested she already knew. Anga Darren Hollis, classified in your system as a deserter. Currently reclassified in mine as an embedded ecological asset, status active. Asa was quiet for a moment. I want him brought in. You are welcome to go find him, Nola said. Asa did not respond to that. The Predator Protocol lost 8 Rangers in 1 engagement, Nola continued. Darren Hollis conducted a 7-week campaign against an entrenched alien force and did not kill a single enemy combatant. He did not fire a weapon. He did not even carry one. He defeated them by understanding the world around him so completely that the world became his instrument. The Fenari were not beaten by a human. They were beaten by a planet that a human learned to speak to. That is not replicable, Asa said. No, Nola agreed. It is not. And that is exactly why it works. You cannot train it, mass produce it, or put in a protocol. It requires a person willing to stop being a conqueror and start being a student. It requires patience that most humans do not have, and most military programs actively discourage. Darren did not become a weapon. He became a relationship. Asa left the briefing without further comment. Within a week, the Predator Protocol on Tessera was quietly suspended, pending review. It was never reinstated. Nola began leaving supply drops at the forest edge. Simple things, water purification tablets, nutrient bars, medical patches. She left them on a flat rock at the boundary between the garrison perimeter and the tree-line. Every morning, they were gone. She never saw who took them. She never tried to point 3 months after the Fenari withdrawal. A new alien species arrived in the Tessara system. The Brith, compact, heavily armored, and aggressive. They had heard the Fenari had abandoned a resource-rich border world and saw an opportunity. A Brith scouting team of 12 landed on the eastern plateau and entered the forest with confidence and heavy equipment. They emerged 41 hours later. Their equipment was intact. Their scouts were uninjured, but they loaded onto their shuttle without a word and left orbit within the hour. Their official report to Brith Command classified Tessera as uninhabitable and recommended permanent exclusion from all colonial planning. When pressed for details, the team leader said only, "The world is occupied." Word traveled. It always does, in a galaxy full of species who trade information like currency. The story changed with each retelling. Some versions said Tessera was home to a human army that lived beneath the ground. Others said the planet itself was sentient and had allied with humanity. The most persistent version, the one that made other species pause, said that a single human had walked into the wilderness, and the wilderness had accepted him so completely that attacking the planet was the same as attacking the man. They called it a myth. Myths were comfortable. Myths meant it was not real. But no species sent scouts to Tessera again. The garrison. Life continued. The settlement grew. Trade routes stabilized. The forest stood unchanged at the edges of human habitation, vast, green, bioluminescent, breathing. Nola Freed kept leaving supplies on the rock. She would stand at the tree sometimes in the evening and watch the forest glow pulse in its slow, living rhythm. Once, on a night when the air was still and the canopy was clear, she thought she saw the glow shift, a single ripple moving through the network in a pattern that did not match any animal or weather phenomenon. A deliberate signal, a greeting maybe, or an acknowledgement. She raised her hand toward the tree and held it there for a moment. The glow pulsed once, softly, and went still. She smiled, turned back to the garrison, and left the forest to its keeper.